There we go. Welcome back to the Unbroken Athlete Podcast. This podcast is your ultimate resource for overcoming the challenges every athlete faces. Whether you're recovering from an injury, managing performance pressure, or just striving to stay motivated throughout setbacks, this podcast is here for you. I'm your co-host, Emily Perrin, here with my co-host, Catherine Logan, and today we're joined by guest Greg Weyl. Greg is a professional lacrosse player in the PLL. He currently plays for the Denver Outlaws, and he spent his college career at Mercyhurst. He currently lives in Denver, where he spends some of his time giving back to the sport of lacrosse through coaching, and is the newly appointed Director of Defense at LaxDen.
Yay, welcome to the show, Greg.
Thank you for having me.
Mostly we wanted to talk about your perspective, like on the mental game and your journey, like through injury, as well as, using your mental skills for performance. But before we take a deeper dive into all of these things, we want to learn a little bit more about, your path to professional lacrosse, a little bit more about where you grew up, how you found the sport, and a little bit of your background first.
Yeah, so I grew up in upstate New York in Pittsford, and obviously lacrosse in New York is pretty big. So I was kind of thrown into it at an early age, but really hockey was my number one sport growing up. So I had actually quit lacrosse from sixth grade to ninth grade,
Oh,
which not a lot of professional lacrosse players probably can say. And
yeah.
around ninth grade, I really wanted to get back into it, and I was actually playing offensive midi as a sophomore on JV lacrosse. And so by the end of sophomore year, the high school coaches were kind of like, hey, if you really want to come up to varsity, you might have to kind of change your position up a little bit. And so they kind of just put a long pole in my hand, and it felt good right away. It was kind of a good fit for me. And so, going into varsity, I didn't really have any of those big D1 looks like a lot of guys do. And so that really a couple D2, a couple D3 looks, and when Mercyhurst kind of came my way, I really just jumped at the opportunity. I didn't really kind of look back, and in retrospect, it was the best decision I've ever made. I'm so happy I had gone to Mercyhurst. It really shaped me into kind of the guy that I am, and really the guys there kept me so grounded. They made fun of me. We made jokes together. It really did keep me grounded as the player that I kind of became. And from probably age 18 to 21-ish, I really kind of developed into the player that I am now. And, I'll never forget my senior year. Obviously growing up in New York, we knew a couple MLL teams. That was the old Professional Lacrosse
Sure.
League. And I was driving to film with two of my teammates, Pat Liddy and Joe Plasky, and I got a text that's like, hey, Tom Mariano, Florida Launch, we're looking to draft you. And I turned to both of them, and I won't say exactly what I said, but I'm
Yeah.
like, are you guys playing with me right now? And they both were like, no, I swear, but I thought they were, so I just ignored it. And we went into film, and my coach came in. He's like, Greg, you just got drafted in the MLL. And I'm like, okay, like
Yeah.
that's a bit of a shock there. And yeah, when my season ended, I got pulled up in 2018 and just kind of never looked back from there.
That's awesome. And, I think we've talked before about specialization. And I know I've talked to, when we were on the road, your colleague at LaxDen, Jack Hanna, about it, where, there's so much pressure to do specialization so early. And the reality is, like, having that hockey background is giving you, a lot of great skills. And it's also just mentally, and Emily, you speak better to this than I can, but I imagine there was just less pressure on you as you're going through those stages of getting ready for college, where you were like, the expectations were not
Yeah.
so like heated.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Um, but let's talk a little bit about, your own experience with injury. Like, you obviously had an injury that people saw, on television last year, but did you
Yeah.
have injuries in college? How was your college days?
Yeah, I think I've told you before, Dr. Logan,
Yeah.
and they actually think my hip issues were from hockey growing up.
Okay.
My freshman year, in fall ball, we were scrimmaging Delaware, and I'll never forget, I kind of opened up my left hip, and I just felt almost like a bubble burst. And I
Yeah.
had gone in and got an MRI, and I had really bad hip dysplasia. That there's just not really that kind of perfect hip socket. And so I had torn my labrum, and the next year I tore my right labrum, but it wasn't to the point where I was kind of unable to play the sport. I was just bracing it. I would do a lot of physical therapy, but other than that, I was really blessed with no injuries. other than a couple hamstring pops here and there that I know you've had to deal with from my side. But really,
Sure.
that injury last year was kind of my biggest hurdle that I had to get over.
Yeah, for sure. So let's dive into that experience. So take us back a little bit to that moment. And, I remember I was there, when you're coming off the field and you have that sort of signature arm dangling type look
Yeah.
to you and you kind of know what's going on. But, what was that moment like for you physically and mentally? And what were some of your challenges like in those initial days?
Yeah, I try not to think about it. So super happy you guys brought it up. But
Yeah.
no, it was just
You're welcome.
it was such a weird situation. It had happened 5 minutes before the real moment that it kind of came out of the socket. I had kind of just picked up a ground ball, and the play actually had kind of blown up on social media, but they
Yeah.
always cut right at the end, right before I get hit. And when
Hmm.
I fell, I know Dr. Logan, you had said it when you fall on your
Yeah.
outstretched arm, my arm kind of just went numb, and
Yeah.
I didn't really think anything of it. And after about 5 minutes, I went to throw a check, and when my arm came up, I'll never forget, it was four notches, like clicks, almost like a door hinge.
Yeah.
And I kind of went up, and I felt the humeral head kind of near my pec area, and I was like, all right, something's wrong here. And
No.
then when I dropped to my knee, it made that swoosh noise that Dr. Logan, you had said was probably it kind of going back into the socket.
Yeah.
Um, and the initial reaction was just, you're obviously freaking out. I freak out over the smallest things, so I'm sitting there mentally shaking. And then the second thing was more the play was still going. So I was kind of looking around trying to help my teammates, but then in the back of my head, I'm like, dude, you gotta get off the field. Something's not right. So I remember I tried to run off the field, and I got a little nauseous, and I kind of fell over, and I was like, just don't throw up on the field, just get off the field. And finally made it to the table where I kind of fell into our trainer's arms, and she brought me into the booth.
Yeah.
First question coming at you, Greg.
All right.
Okay, so I work with many injured athletes, mostly in the ACL realm. And one of the first things that comes up in the initial phases of an injury, and we're talking like whether that's the first couple days, the first couple weeks, is really the experience of loss, right? And it can be the loss of so many things, right? Because it's the loss of, okay, well, I can't actually move my body normally, right? I can't function normally. I can't play my sport, right? And so I'm wondering if you experienced any of that, like kind of like right off the bat and in those initial days. And if not, what do you think, particularly like, and I don't even know what the timeline of the surgery on for your shoulder injury was. Like, are you getting surgery right away, or is it a little bit delayed? Like, what do you think were the main emotional components to the first couple weeks of your injury?
Yeah, I definitely went through that. I will never forget. So I got surgery 10 days after
Okay.
I had gotten hurt. And we tried to rehab because we had a game the next week in Utah. And so this injury occurred on a Saturday. And so by Monday, they have to start to develop like, hey, is he going to go on IR? Is he going to play? And so we went and got the MRI. And that's when the extents of like just basically how big the damage was kind of came out. And I called Dr. Logan. She was like, well, you got to kind of go through the Stedman clinic, see what's going on really. And then when all of those imaging went back to the Stedman clinic, who's kind of associated with the PLL, uh, the team doctor called and was like, Greg, this is something you can't play with. Just the extent of the damage overall kind of hit me. And so that was on Tuesday. And I kind of just broke down. I'll never forget. I was crying because I had to call Coach Sudan. And obviously my parents were asking if I was going to be in Utah, and it overwhelmed me. Like I was sitting actually in the chair I'm in now because I got the call, then I'm calling my parents, then I'm still talking to Coach Sudan, and all of a sudden you see, on Instagram that I'm on IR, and it just kind of hit me
Yeah.
all at once, really. And I just kind of broke down at that moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I appreciate you sharing that because I
Yeah.
think for our listeners, for athletes of all ages, right? I think it's really important to hear that from professional athletes because I think there is this assumption, right, that especially around resilience, which is a lot of the work we do, right, that it's like okay, as soon as these really big challenges come up for us, right? It's like, okay, put your head down, let's get to work, let's, get right after it, and like we're gonna figure this out, right? And I think a lot of times, and what I see in so many athletes is that can actually skip over a really important part of the process, right? Which is this emotion and the grieving and
Mhm.
the overwhelm, and it's okay to be there. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
I do. I think it's a lot. I think whether it's like an injury like you sustained, and obviously we were talking through those days, and or today I told at least three or four people right before we got on here that, yep, you have this big. I just went through MRIs after I got out of the OR and say you need surgery, and it's just a lot. And I usually I'm telling people, hey, I'm just going to give you a broad overview, but I fully understand you're probably not really listening to me right now. And
Yeah.
that we're going to have to circle back in a few days and kind of do it again. But it's just, I think you hear this, and whatever your expectations are for that. And for someone like you, that turnaround has to happen so fast to make the decision that it can just feel like, MRI this day, you got to know in so many hours what's your plan. So it's a lot.
Yeah, I also, mine is kind of funny too. I have like the largest phobia of just blood. And so I
I
think I
do.
told Dr. Logan, I go in for the MRI and the radiologist is going through and he's like, so you tore every single like every part of your
Yeah.
labrum, this is where you kind of fractured the humeral head. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, all right, like that's nice, man. I'm like, all right, cut it out. Like I get it. I'm really hurt. And he's like, yeah, so this is also where you tore the rotator cuff and you kind of
Yeah.
see it. And then all of a sudden I'm feeling my shoulder. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like, I'm really hurt. And he looks at me, he's like, you good? I'm like, nope. And
No.
I lied
Yes.
down where I got the MRI and passed out. And
Yeah.
just, I woke up and they're like fanning me and everything. I'm like, I'm driving home. I'm getting out of here.
Yeah. It
Nothing
is
like a
like,
good pass out.
yeah. Well, I think I do remember, and hopefully it's okay to share, that you were so like worried about sutures and dressing changes and stuff, and you did great. So, you know,
So tough.
yeah. Uh, So, as you, were like prepping, like to get ready for surgery, I know you have a really great support system around you through like your family and through your friends, and you had already like been set up with some really great physical therapists. But what else? Like, what was helpful? What were your strategies to sort of prepare for surgery that sort of made you feel a little better as you,
Um,
as well as you could?
yeah, I mean, I think that I started to do like the why me thing, and then you realize that labrum, rotator cuff, just shoulder injuries is not as bad as what a lot of people go through. And that kind of helped. And then, I mean, I know you said it, and Dr. Logan, I know you've met my mom. Like my mom is kind of my number one.
Yeah.
She's a doctor, so she kind of knew and just she's the greatest human in the world. And just every day was like, you're gonna be fine. Stop being a baby. Just get through it. You're okay. And I mean, it helped so much just talking to her. And I kind of just got through it. And I honestly, at probably the eighth day, because it was 10 days after the injury, I got the surgery. Probably by day eight, I was like, let's just do this. Like, I'm ready for it. Like, let's do it.
No, you do. Shout out to your mom. You've got a great mom.
Dr. Allen.
You're the best.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's like fast forward a little bit once you get through that initial sort of perioperative sort of stage and you started to get cleared for, obviously the season hasn't started yet, but cleared for really like full contact and full training. What was that moment like? Like, did you feel ready? Were you excited? Like, talk a little bit about any fear or like confidence issues you had at that time.
Yeah, definitely a lot of confidence issues because you're still the mental side. You're like, oh, what if I kind of re-tear it? And
Mhm.
the first 3 months you said it, you're like, you just got to get through those 3 months. You're still just so weak. You're in the sling. And every day after that 3 month mark, you can start to just do more and more and more until you're starting to do push-ups without thinking about it or a pull-up without thinking about it. Then all of a sudden, when you're back into lacrosse, you're shooting without stretching. You're going 100%. And then, I actually went over to LaxDen and kind of did a couple one-on-ones with Jack. And I'll never forget, I I kind of fell over, which is embarrassing to say. He made me fall, and I fell and caught myself in like a push-up position. And he looked at me, he's like, "You good?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm good." I was like, "All right, let's do it." And then so I can't fall again, but other than
Yeah.
that, that was the moment where I'm like, "All right, I can go 100%. I'm 100% fine now."
Yeah. And it's,
Sorry, I was going to say, I think there's this message, one, in social media and health and wellness, and particularly for athletes, like trusting your body, right? Like trust your body, trust your body. And I think what we have to remember is that when you've been through a traumatic injury, right? And I would consider your injury traumatic in the sense that, um, it's pretty intense, right? And there's surgery and there's a lengthy recovery process, right? Like that ability to trust your body gets skewed, right? So it's almost a relearning and redeveloping a relationship with your body and your physical capacity. And it sounds like that was a big part of your journey, right?
100%. That trust is it's so funny. Like that moment, I actually just really won't forget because I caught myself, and the first thing I did was try and get back up, and then I paused for a second. I was like, "Oh my gosh, is it okay?" Oh, it's okay. Perfect. Get back up. And there's moments where you might feel like a sharp pain, and it's just mental. Your body still might be trying to protect the injury, but you're 100% fine. And at this point, I know Dr. Logan, you said this to me 6 months ago, like my left shoulder will be stronger in 6 months than my right, and it truly is now. Like I feel so much better than where I was even before the injury.
yeah, I think, people don't really appreciate how shoulder dislocations, how like that moment is so dramatic that it's like an ACL tear, like where people talk about, oh, I had the pop and then I couldn't get up, and they knew they had to get off the field. I think shoulder dislocations are like that too, that you almost like there's just a lot of fear. The whole sign that we use in the medical field to know like whether or not we're worried about shoulder instability is literally called the apprehension test, because it's like moving the shoulder in a way that it's not even pain that stops people. It's like this, oh my God, I don't like that. It freaks me out. It scares me.
Yeah.
So I think there's a huge mental component. But you said like, I think it's just what you're sort of alluding to is like you just take steps and you do reps, and the more reps, it just builds like your confidence, and it just takes time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all a time game.
Yeah. What about as far as like when you were kind of getting through those components that were a little boring in that sort of 3 to 6 month kind of range? Like, did you have times where you're like, I'm so done with this, I'm never going to get to the other side? And like, if so, what'd you do about it?
Yeah, full honesty, I think the 2 month mark to the 4 month mark, every day I was like, I should just retire. I'm not going to be the player I was. That this thing
Yeah.
is not going to get better. And, you keep having those negative thoughts. And then what I actually started to do was I kind of just made it a game. Like every day, okay, can you do this? Can you go make that coffee now? Like, can you outstretch your arm and make that pot of coffee? And there were definitely times where you would definitely go through that valley where I would text, I might text Sudo, our head coach, or a
Yeah.
lot of times I would text Mike Manley, who's kind of like, he's like an older brother to me.
Yeah. Best
And
mustache in the league.
that
Just,
best mustache in the league. Probably the least funny guy in the league though. But Mike's been through more injuries than
yeah.
anyone I know. The guy's 55 years old. So
Well, he's also like a statey. So I
yeah,
think his job is,
he's a state trooper. But I remember I texted him probably at the 3 month mark because I would yeah, we're from the same city. And funny story actually about Mike is he's 10 years older than me. And so I was in eighth grade at a just or no, I was a freshman. I just started playing lacrosse again, and I was at a camp. And Mike was my camp counselor. And then fast forward 15 years later, he's my roommate in the PLL. Like just the smallest world. But
yeah.
yeah, Mike was just I texted him trying to get sympathy almost. Like,
Yeah.
hey man, like I really need someone to be like, dude, you're going through so much. And he's like, you're being the biggest baby, man. Like you're
Yeah.
fine. Just go work out. You're fine. And I looked at it and I was like, all right, I'm going to go to physical therapy and stop complaining. And it actually really helped me out a lot.
Oh, he is so funny. No,
He's the best. He's,
um,
he's the best and the worst.
You might have to edit that. I'm
yeah,
so mad. Poor Mike Manley. I don't even know him, but
he
man.
can take it. He can take
Yeah,
it.
he could. No, he could take it.
He'll be fine.
Um, okay, I have a question, because I think this is something else that athletes, and I'm working with a couple athletes that are in the grind of an ACL return to play. And one of the biggest things they're working through is uncertainty. And uncertainty really parallels with anxiety, right? Because anxiety is just uncertainty. It's an element of fear plus I don't know what's going to happen, right? And you alluded to it a little bit earlier, right? This like I don't know if I'm going to be the same player that I was before. I don't know if I'll ever get back to where I was. And I think it's really important to normalize that and to not necessarily make that bad. I think those are really valid fears for an athlete that cares and they want to be really good. So I'm wondering if that showed up for you. And if so, what was that experience like? And are you still even working through that since you're not back into your season yet?
Yeah. No, I think in the smallest sense, I probably am still working through that. Because you just never know, right? It's because you haven't played in a real game since the injury. But I almost kind of use that, I guess, to my advantage. I obviously went through it in a negative way really hard, but when you kind of look at it like, okay, am I going to be the same player? And if you look at it from that mindset of like, no, I'll actually be better. I'll be stronger. I'm going to know how to protect myself a little more. Then it kind of helped me a lot more in wanting to go to physical therapy. Okay, I'm going to work on the instability. I'm going to get stronger. The rotator cuff muscles will get stronger. And you almost look at it from the glass half full perspective, and it helped me tremendously. But there's still doubts in my mind. I mean, up until probably the first practice at training camp, I'll still have doubts. But I think that that's just normal, right? If you realize you're going to have the doubts, then you just kind of embrace them, and it makes it a lot better.
Yeah.
But I think every single athlete goes through it.
Yeah. Yeah. And something I talk frequently with my athletes about is like, it's not about you're not going to get rid of the uncertainty, right? And that's, in sport and a recovery process, but also just in life, right? Till the day you die. So it's how do you build your capacity to just live in the uncertainty, right? And do all the things that you can be certain about, right? All of the little steps, all of the things, ensuring that you are taking care of yourself, you're addressing what did you say just now? Kind of, I know how to protect myself better.
Yeah, just the understanding kind of for me, honestly, talking to Dr. Logan. I mean, I texted Dr. Logan probably. I bet every orthopedic surgeon loves when their patients text them every day.
We know, Greg.
But
We know.
yeah, but understanding what exactly I tore, what happened to the arm, how it kind of fractured slightly, and realizing that if I fall, I probably shouldn't fall with my left arm outstretched when I know I'm going down. Why not go down in kind of a protective way? And you develop almost a better mindset about your own body from the
Yeah.
experience, and I kind of use that actually to kind of help me get through it.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I can't say I always know how it happens, but I definitely have patients that do come back with a like larger sense of themselves and feel stronger and then actually perform better and then maybe like get an uptick in their performance or their playing time or and I think part of it is just sometimes, especially someone like you who has a job, who is working also at LaxDen, and you're trying to manage a lot of things that it's sometimes hard to give yourself all of that extra time to work on little edges. And so, as an adult, right? So when you're like in college, or I shouldn't even say that, your job is to go to school, but your job is, but
Yeah.
you have more people around you supporting you, right?
Yeah.
But I do think sometimes when you have an injury, you just sort of say, I'm going to really focus and I'm going to work on all these things that maybe I could have worked on before, but really just didn't prioritize. So I think kudos to you, because not everybody puts in all the work and says, like, tries to address things that they're struggling with. So I think you did a great job with that.
Thank you.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
it was
Yeah.
definitely tough. It was those first 3 months were the largest grind I
Yeah.
think I've been through in a long time, probably in my
Yeah.
life, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I think you had great physical therapists. Like,
Yeah.
I know Nate and Aaron took really great care of you, and they're awesome. So,
Oh yeah, I mean Nate, Aaron, and then yeah, even when I went back to
oh,
Rochester,
New York,
Jason
yeah,
at Mana, yeah,
yeah,
those guys really, you know, waking up at 6:15 on a Tuesday morning in a sling to go drive to physical therapy
yeah.
is not enjoyable. But when you get there and they're kind of pushing you to take that extra step, you know, take the sling off, don't be scared, and those all those guys really helped out so much.
Yeah.
So before we go into like our little hot seat, sort of questions, I do want to ask you, not related to injury, as far as like what would you share that you do as far as mental preparation before the game, just on the performance side? Like, do you have a routine that you've done for years, and is that going to change, or are you just going to go back into that same routine?
Probably same routine. I think the one thing I'll add is definitely the shoulder stretches before the game.
Mhm.
Probably should do
Good.
that.
I like
Hopefully I
that.
don't.
Yeah.
Hopefully I don't forget that. But no, I think
That's good.
I do the same. Yeah, I really do the same thing. We always have a shoot around in the morning before a game,
Mhm.
and the everyone probably 99% of the league takes a nap after that before a game. I just can't sleep on game days, so I'll usually just watch the film that we have, whoever I'm covering really, I'll watch their film. And then I try and just decompress. I'll watch either Friends or like One Tree Hill. Just something just that's my go-to. I don't know why. It's
It's good. That's a
very
good one.
super
Yeah.
sus,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, I do that. And
It's
then
like
Mike,
relaxing.
very relaxing.
Yeah.
And Mike always goes to Starbucks, so I'll go with him and get a Starbucks. And then, yeah, really before the game, I always do because I've had really bad hamstring problems, which Dr. Logan's helped me out with a lot back in 2021. And so I'll really stretch my hamstrings before the game, and then kind of it's just business as usual from there.
What's your Starbucks order?
I do a venti cold brew with a lot of almond milk.
Yeah. What is Manly's? It's just like,
Mike does venti cold brew black, and then he looks at me
yeah.
and he's like, "You get milk in
I
your
was gonna
coffee?"
say
I'm
it's gonna
like,
be
"Yeah,
like just a black coffee, like very statey
yeah,
of him. Yeah.
yeah." And I'm just like, "All right, man, sorry, I like milk."
One of the things, solely because I think this will be good for the listeners and it's a learning tidbit, but one of the things that I want to come back to in your routine is we laughed at it, the Friends and the One Tree Hill
Okay.
thing. But what I think is really important for people to remember, especially when on game day where there is a lot of pressure, a lot of expectation, and many athletes will say that their thoughts are running 100 miles per hour, right? And this is all on like a spectrum, and many athletes will actually experience this a couple days before game day. I work with many pro guys, PLO guys, that it happens the night before. And a strategy that's really helpful that I think we don't talk about enough is give your brain something to do. Like give your brain something better to do, right? And so what I'm hearing from you is like, I'm giving my brain something fun and easy and joyful to kind of watch, right?
Yeah,
Because that can actually be really, really helpful. And it's, yes, some people will say, well, that's just like using distraction and kind of like the easy way out. And I totally disagree. I think we have to remember that like mental capacity, it takes energy. So if your brain is operating at 100 miles per hour and there's so many thoughts all day long and you have a 7 o'clock game, you're draining yourself, right?
yeah, oh yeah,
So I think that's really important. And that's a strategy I would encourage younger players to think about. I know so many of my college players, like they'll go on the road and they'll have a night game. So they're just in the hotel all day long, right? So
yeah,
it can be really helpful to give your brain something to do, something easy, something fun. I'm the same way. If I have a super like intense session that I have to do or a presentation, like I am 1000% putting on a show. It's not One Tree Hill or Friends, but um, I'm more of like a new girl,
yeah.
sex city
I
type of
mean,
person. But yeah.
it's really just yeah. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
just I mean, I think I've
This-
seen Friends like probably 9 times through,
yeah.
which is so bad to say, but it's funny though. I mean, in terms of like the actual focus part, I'm a huge believer. Like I've been a believer since probably hockey in 8th grade. I've started doing it where you just kind of picture yourself making a really cool play. And that kind of gets rid of the anxiety too, but I don't do that until like the bus ride over.
Yeah.
Because once you think about something fun, you get more energetic versus my first 3 or 4 years of professional lacrosse, I was always just still so nervous. I'd think about falling, being on like,
Hang up.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I was on Sports Center top 10 for the wrong reasons. Lyle Thompson scored behind the back on me. And it's funny because my buddies just replayed that every single day. And I was like, all right, well, at least I made Sports Center, right?
Yeah.
But,
I know.
but
Where are you guys? Yeah.
yeah, but no, if you think about that all the time, you'll probably mess up. But if you think about making that cool play and having a lot of fun and making the play that can help your team win, it just kind of relaxes me, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So Emily, what do you think? Are you ready to move on to our hot seat questions? Greg, I should ask
Yeah.
you.
All
You're
right.
ready. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
All right.
All right.
I'm good at this.
So
Okay. Good. I can't wait.
we've got 6 questions. Catherine and I will rotate.
Yeah.
I'll start, but essentially the idea is to answer them as quickly as possible, right? Like we don't want 3-minute long answers. We want you to get to the point and come up with what pops into your brain. All right. Favorite pre-workout snack or fuel?
Uh, Coffee and peanut butter toast.
That's good. All right. What is playing, as far as pregame, what's playing in your headphones?
Oh, this is gonna be so embarrassing. One Direction or rap.
What? That is a surprise. I love
I
it.
love people with like really
know.
polarizing music. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Okay, if you could say one thing to your younger athlete self about game day preparation to help your younger self succeed, what would you say?
Stretch.
All right. What is a random talent that you have that we wouldn't know?
I can make anyone on earth laugh.
Shouldn't have laughed at that.
Yeah, I know. We both laughed.
Got you guys out.
What lacrosse player or athlete in general did you watch or seek motivation from while you were growing up?
Oh man. Alex Ovechkin and now Josh Allen.
Do you think Ovechkin's going to get the record this year?
I don't think he's gonna get it this year because of that broken ankle, but I guarantee if he does, I will be watching that game.
Yeah, Emily, he's going to at some point eclipse like one of Wayne Gretzky's like long-standing records. So it's very exciting. If you're in a
Which will
hockey
never get
household,
broken after that.
yeah,
Well, I'm
Yeah.
only in a hockey household when I'm in your
when you
household.
visit, yeah. So Greg knows my boys, and Emily's come and stay. She's like, when she's come out, I'm like, you can stay at our house, but just so you know, they will be up early trying to get you to play knee hockey. Do it. All right, last question. Who would you like to see on our podcast coming up?
Ooh, I think I mean I've said his name every time. I truly think Mike.
He's gotten a
I
lot of love
know.
this episode.
Yeah, he's got a lot of love this episode. I'd say Mike or I'm trying to think of who's had kind of a bad setback. No, I mean it's really got to be him because from his ACLs to hips to you name it,
Yeah.
he'd be
He had
good.
the elbow too 1 year,
The
although I think that
elbow.
happened
Who else? Who else?
like at work.
Oh my gosh, this one I get to think about.
And it doesn't have to be someone that's gone through an
Yeah.
injury. It could literally just be
Oh,
like,
okay.
yeah.
I like that. Man, I really want you guys to get into the NFL then and get Josh
Okay.
Allen.
Okay. Josh
Yeah.
Allen. Probably won't
Okay.
happen, but it's good thinking.
He's my Lord and Savior, so please.
Okay. We'll shoot high, aim high, right? Awesome.
Right.
Okay. Well, Greg, thank you for coming onto our podcast. Like, we've obviously gotten to know each other a lot over the last few years, but especially this last year. And I'm really grateful to have gotten to know you. And, I think you're a great, great athlete, great person, and also great coach. No, we're super excited that you're here. And I think people will learn a lot from your experiences. And thank you for being so forthright.
Yeah, thank you. No, it was great. I know everything you've done for me, Dr. Logan, Emily, everything you're doing, obviously social media wise to help out athletes. It's great. So it was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Unbroken Athlete podcast. You can find our show notes and more on our website, www.theunbrokenathlete.com. Don't forget to check out our Unbroken Athlete app, now available on iOS and the App Store for links to the show, resources, and our Unbroken Athlete programs. If you found today's episode helpful, share it with your teammate or someone who's ready to up their game. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast for more tips on resilience, performance, and recovery. Until next time, stay strong and unbroken.